Sup, Dad?
Welcome to This Dad Reads, a pop culture podcast on books, shows, games, and all things nerdy. What is going on, my friends? I hope everyone is doing well out there. We are officially in a new year. Happy 2025, everyone. I am starting off the new year feeling a little bit under the weather, so if my voice sounds a little bit different, that is why. I would like to say that it's just from too much partying, too much wild and crazy times on vacation from work, but no, it's really just too many germs being spread around, school-age children, my wife working at an elementary school. That's really what it is. So, the holiday break, it was nice. It was good to be with family. It was good to celebrate. But just some forced downtime is what sickness does sometimes. And sometimes that's not a terrible thing. So my kids got a lot of extra screen time, a lot of more video games, but there was also a lot of puzzles, a lot of coloring, a lot of reading, of course. So, I'm back into things, ready to go, ready for a new year. And that's really want to start this episode off by talking about is just reading goals. It's the beginning of the year. You may or may not be someone who does New Year's resolutions. I don't really do those anymore, but I definitely do set reading goals for myself. And I definitely exceeded my reading goal of 50 books in 2024. I ended up hitting actually closer to 60. It was right around 59. And I officially set my reading goal for 2025 to be 60 books. I feel like that's kind of a comfortable pace for me. I did that relatively easily last year. I didn't feel like I was pushing myself too hard. And again, if I fall a little bit short, that's not a terrible thing. I still feel like it does even give me some breathing room to, play games, watch shows, watch movies. So I'm happy with that. I want to know what your reading goals are. So please let me know. Hit me up on my social media accounts. Let me know what your reading goals for 2025 are. Some people's are very impressive. So anything nearing the 100 is like super impressive to me. So kudos to you guys. But whatever your reading goals are, I've said this in years past, whatever reading goal you have, I hope it is something that is achievable. And if not, it is something flexible. It can be whatever it will be. I also just want to state that I've been doing the podcast now for a little over 2 years, but January 2025, the month this episode releases, marks 4 years of This Dad Reads being established, being out there. That was the month that I launched everything. I started writing reviews online. I started doing Bookstagram. So I just want to mark this moment and just express my gratitude for everyone who's kind of joined me on this journey. It's definitely become something that's not what I originally think it was going to be. It's become so much more. It's been about community. It's about people. It's been about friendships and connections. It's been so much fun and so cool. And I cannot wait to see what happens and what 2025 brings to This Dad Reads. I'm hoping to attend some more conventions. I'm hoping to get to see some more people who I've met online in person. So whatever the year brings, I just want to throw that out there and say thank you. And I can't wait to see what this year holds for all of us. I'm not going to go through a whole list of the things that I got for Christmas, but I just wanted to especially shout out my friends at Inkstone Books at this moment because in December last month, they sent me 3 of their special edition Star Wars books, one of them being Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss, and the other 2 being from the Essential Legends collections, Death Troopers and Darth Plagueis. These books are so gorgeous. Inkstone Books does an amazing job with sprayed edges and foil details underneath the dust jacket. Their editions are so beautiful, and I've talked about them time and time again. And I'm actually thrilled to announce that I have become an official rep with Inkstone Books for the beginning of this year. So stay tuned on the podcast and on my socials for more of that, but I'll be featuring more of Inkstone's books from their subscription and from their special edition line. They publish not just Star Wars books, but they publish a whole bunch of other sci-fi, fantasy special edition books. So I'm really excited to see where this partnership goes. And Inkstone, I love you guys, and I will continue to support. So I'm excited about this new partnership. The new year is also a great time to get yourself organized, and I have the best way for you to do that. I partnered up once again with my friends at Clever Fox to give away one This Dad Reads listener who is based in the US or Canada, one of their amazing planners for free. So they actually recently sent me their new Dated Weekly Pro Premium 2025 planner, which I was using one of their planners last year, which I already loved, but this one is bigger and it is dated from January to December, and I cannot wait to dive in and use all of the stickers, use all of the organizational tabs. They organize things by like month and quarter, and it allows you time to kind of have reflection. So there's kind of journaling aspect to it as well. But Clever Fox has planners and journals for tons of different needs. There's diet and fitness journals, there's finance and budgeting planners, there's daily planners, record books, password books, travel planning, medical and health stuff. And all these come with tons of different types of stickers and ways to keep yourself organized. So I am doing a giveaway this month to listeners of this podcast. So all you have to do is go check out my post promoting this episode on my social channels. You have to be based in the US, Canada, or the UK. All you have to do is be following Clever Fox on socials, which is at Clever Fox Planner. All you have to do is like and comment on my giveaway post, and then you're in. So I will have all the full details in the show notes of this episode and also on the social media post itself. So definitely go check that out. Clever Fox is an amazing brand, and I cannot wait to continue to use their products and share something with one of you guys. So let's just go ahead and dive into everything that I've been into lately. So I'm going to start off with books that I've read since my last episode. Happy to say that there was another Star Wars that came out. It was Tempest Breaker by Cavan Scott. I finished listening to that. It's the fully produced, full cast audio drama, all about, Lorna Dee and her relationship with the Jedi and the Nile. And I think I made the decision, and I think this is the first place I'm actually announcing it. So I am going to not fully review this story until the script version comes out later this year. I have said this before, but I sometimes struggle with audiobooks, and audio dramas usually are better for me because it's a full cast and it's more easy to follow. But I'm going to just be completely honest that there was definitely times I struggled with this book or with this story because my brain doesn't work that way. It's so hard for me to stay focused on what is going on, and there's so much action taking place, and without any sort of, narrative about who's shooting who or who's doing what to whom, some points just got confusing to me. I'm just going to be honest. There were definitely some cool story beats and things that happened, but I don't feel like I got my full grasp of the story, and I want to follow along with it again with the book in my hand. So Cavan Scott always does an amazing job, and the production was stellar, but I'm just going to hold off on my full review and thoughts on that. I think it comes out in May, but so just a little bit of a longer wait on that. It'll be cool to revisit it later, and I might even listen to it again. And full disclosure, I listened to it a little bit faster speed, and I listened to it while I was driving, so part of it is probably just the way I listen to things. I need to be a little bit more focused, but all that being said, I'm just going to be a little bit easy on myself with this one. And again, come back and revisit it in a couple months when the script book comes out. Another book I read was The Princess Swap, Cinderella and the Beast, or Beauty and the Glass Slipper by Kim Bussing, which is actually out today, January 7th, the day of this podcast release. This book is kind of a cool revision of fairy tales. It kind of mixes up the story of Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast. My review of this book is actually up today, and I am chatting with the author, Kim, later on this exact episode. So I was able to have Kim on the show, talked a lot about how she went about writing this book, what her thought process was, and what her inspirations were behind it. So this is a really cool YA book that is great for probably kids around 8 to 10, depending on their maturity level, all the way up to, fans of Disney, adults who love YA and Disney stuff. So it's a really cool retelling of these two stories and kind of flips it on its head. And I'll get into a lot more of that in a little bit when I talk to Kim. As you guys know, I'm in my Brandon Sanderson journey. I read Elantris. I finished Elantris and really enjoyed that. A standalone novel. As for right now, I think there's some sequels coming down the line. But I read that book. I really, really enjoyed it. I also read The Black Echo, which is the first Harry Bosch novel from Michael Connelly. As I mentioned last month, my wife and I were doing a buddy read of The Lincoln Lawyer, and we were going to go to the next book, and I was like, I think we need to go back and start, with the very first book in the Connelly verse. So we did that. We're now buddy reading almost all of the Harry Bosch books. So that's the first book. She loved it. She is fully hooked. I've converted her, and so I'm so excited about that. I also read the newest Star Wars novel that's coming out in February. It is from the new Reign of the Empire trilogy, The Mask of Fear, written by Alexander Freed. My review of this book is still in process and will probably be out sometime in January, so definitely stay tuned on my website for that. And books that I have on deck to read this month are Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, Volwar's Reign, which is a sci-fi novel by Colton Taylor. I am going to be reading Head Cases by John McMahon, which is a new thriller series from Minotaur Books. And I'm planning to read Darkly by Marisha Pessel, which is a YA mystery thriller horror from Delacorte Press. So that's it for books that I have read and what I'm planning on reading. So let's dive into what I've been watching. Of course, I have been watching and absolutely loving Skeleton Crew on Disney Plus from Star Wars. It's been so good and so fun, and I'm actually experiencing it firsthand with my son. This is the first Star Wars live action show that we are watching kind of at the same time. Usually I watch them first and then he watches them later, but we're watching them literally almost at the same time. We don't watch every single episode together, unfortunately, but he's watching usually a day or so right behind me, and it's been so fun to just keep up with him. I am planning on doing kind of a, not rewatch, but go back and start over again and watch it with my wife. It's just so fun and adventurous and emotional and mysterious. So it has all those great things that I love in Star Wars. And of course it has Neil. Goes without saying, of course it has Neil. And by the time this episode comes out, I will have watched, but as of right now, I have not yet watched The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim. I'm really excited to finally watch it. I did not make it out to theaters, unfortunately, but I guess fortunately it hit digital like at the end of December, which is crazy. So, I mean, that's lucky for me, and I'd much prefer to watch it at home anyway. So I cannot wait to watch this. I know it's gotten some kind of mixed reviews and thoughts. I've heard some good things from Tolkien fans online, so I love just a good, re-envisioning of a world. That's what I've loved about The High Republic, because it's telling these stories in so many different medium, right? So there's manga, there's comics, there's books, there's animated shows, there's live action shows, and so I don't see why we shouldn't have something in Middle-earth in anime style. So I cannot wait to dive into that. I also want to say some book mail I got around Christmas time. I posted about this on my socials. I was sent by William Morrow the War of the Rohirrim official visual companion book and the Art of the War of Rohirrim books. So those were some amazing surprise Christmas gifts that I got as well. So I already have some companion pieces to the movie, so I haven't dove into them too much because I don't want to get spoiled, but I love having already those kind of pieces that are at the ready for once the movie's over and I'm probably freaking out about it and wanting to dive into about how it was made, the inspiration behind it, and just all the behind the scenes details that I love so much. A number of new tabletop games made their way to my household over the holidays as well, and while we haven't had the time to play all of them and gather our thoughts about all of them yet, I wanted to at least just list them off here to let you know what I'm planning on talking about on my website and probably on next month's episode of the podcast and on my socials coming very soon. So those games are A Gentle Rain from Incredible Dream Studios, Hello Kitty A Day at the Park from Maestro Media, The Diary of a Wimpy Kid Clue game from The Op Games, The Mandalorian Adventures from Asmodee, and the Altered TCG game, also from Asmodee. So I am excited to dive into all of these games. Some of them I'll be playing by myself, some I'll be playing with my adult friends, some I'll be playing with my kids. So now that the year is kind of back to normal and back in swing, I'm ready to get my regular game nights going. So I will have a lot more to talk about in terms of the tabletop games in a future episode. And I am going to take a quick break, but after this, I will be having a discussion with author Kim Bussing. Heroes and Villains has you covered when it comes to fashionable fandom gear. That's why they're the premium licensed apparel and accessories store. From underwear to sweaters to backpacks and robes, Heroes and Villains is stocked with tons of stuff from properties we love, like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Marvel, Arcane, DC Comics, Dungeons & Dragons, Magic the Gathering, and many more. If you've got some holiday money burning a hole in your pocket, then check out what they have to offer at heroesvillains.com. And while you're there, go ahead and use code ThisDadReads to add an additional 20% off your first order. That's right, I am hooking my podcast listeners up. That's code ThisDadReads when you visit heroesvillains.com for an additional 20% off your first order. And yes, this code stacks on top of sales, you guys. Now you can nerd out in style thanks to Heroes and Villains. Joining me today is the author of the upcoming first book in the Princess Swap series from Penguin Random House Books for Young Readers. It's author Kim Bussing. Welcome to the show, Kim.
Thanks so much, Jason. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you. I love having a first-time author on the show. So I love just getting to chat and meet new authors and then hear about their books. So excited.
Yeah, and I love chatting with other readers. So couldn't be better. Couldn't be
amazing.
Better.
That's basically what this whole show is about. Even when I talk to authors or my friends, it's all about just like books and like how much we love books. And so that world, I'm excited.
Yeah, nerding out.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just start off. This is our first time meeting. Tell me and the listeners just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I am an author of fairy tales for children and adults. I grew up in Seattle or outside of Seattle near like a misty lake and misty woods, which was really the perfect setting for a kid with no siblings and a big imagination who grew up reading a lot of fantasy. And that really kind of stoked a love of stories and imagining kind of like the magic that I feel like very pressed against the mundane in our everyday lives. I kind of resisted the allure of stories for a long time. When I was growing up, I thought I was going to be a lawyer and a dermatologist and work on Wall Street and make a ton of money. And I couldn't shake writing. So I ended up getting to travel quite a bit, working as a journalist in Australia, interning in production in Hollywood, getting my MFA in Arizona, and now just, ending up with my cats writing fairy tales.
Sounds great. I mean, sounds like you're living the dream, basically. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Well, speaking of, your world now of being an author, I want to be hopefully among the first to congratulate you on your first series, The Princess Swap. That's so exciting. I've had the pleasure of reading the first book, it kind of has two titles, right? It's Cinderella and the Beast / Beauty and the Glass Slipper, which is so much fun. And like this book is kind of being touted as like Disney meets Freaky Friday. And I definitely got vibes from that. Like, what can fans of fairy tales and princesses and fantasy expect from this series and this first book in particular?
Yeah. So in every book in the series, it's two fairy tale princesses and their stories are flipped. So in the first book, we have Cinderella ending up in the castle of a beast and Belle ending up trapped in a wicked stepmother's cellar and having to, get a prince's help to survive and escape and help her family. And it's really fun just to kind of, take characters that we know and love and get to see them in new situations that we also know and love. So it feels very familiar, but getting to see, characters test themselves against new challenges and new fantastical situations. And as a writer, it's just kind of a fun logic and problem solving game a little bit to figure out how do these pieces work together? How do you retain the same characters and their same personalities in these situations and make sure that kind of the Easter eggs are there for readers and for myself too, because that's where the fun is, and figure out how do you tie these two things together.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that basically kind of segues into my next question, which you kind of answered it a little bit, but like, how was it and how much of a challenge was it, I guess, creatively to write these familiar characters in this really brand new way? Like, if you think these characters, like this book kind of flips the script. So how did you go about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, I started writing by writing fan fiction. So I think that, like from when I was 7, I was writing like mashups of Chronicles of Narnia and Halo.
Oh, I love that.
I always I had a lot of practice going in of how like flipping stories and putting characters into new situations. And I really liked the challenge of imagining, what if. And fairy tales really kind of demand that retelling. Fairy tales have been told and retold throughout centuries.
Sure.
But getting that chance to be like, Cinderella is a beautiful story, but not a lot happens in the original. Like she has a fairy godmother and she goes to a ball, but what happens if she's actually facing beasts and facing much higher stakes? So that was really fun. And then I think it also forces you, when you put characters in these new situations, to have to really get to know who they are at the core and how their personal stories shaped them. And so having that like introspective experience with them was really exciting too. And to be able to like build a different relationship with who they are.
Definitely. And like, what were some strategies that you utilized to help make these princesses not just, fairy tale princesses, but like actual relatable people?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just the way you would create any character is spending a lot of time really examining who they are at the core. So their hopes and, the desires beneath those hopes and their fears and how an experience a year ago or 10 years ago shaped who they are now. And I think what's really fun about, especially working with fairy tale characters, is in a lot of the stories, they're very flat. Like Cinderella in every story has gone through extreme trauma, but she's still a really nice girl who's nice to everybody. And it's like, no, that's not how people are.
Yeah.
So getting to think, okay, if you're a 12-year-old girl and you've lost a parent and you're dealing with adversity and a really bad family situation, how does that shape you and how do you triumph over it emotionally and, physically, I guess, she's trapped in a castle, but, how do you emerge and be the person you want to be and survive?
Right. And I want to avoid spoilers because I feel like there's some kind of spoilery elements to this book that I don't want to like give away for people who might be jumping in. And I will say that this book is basically like a middle grade and higher. I'd probably say around age 10 or so, maybe 8 or 9 if they're kind of mature readers, but anywhere honestly up to adulthood. I feel like people who are big fans of either, Disney or fairy tales or fantasy would really love and relate to this book. People might be coming into this book maybe with a certain set of expectations, like, okay, I know the story of Belle, I know these stories, but what do you think people are going to be the most surprised by jumping into this first book in the series? And what are you the most excited about for readers to discover?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think it's going to be really different for everybody because whenever you talk to people about, what they love about fairy tales, it's always so different. I think just seeing familiar situations like the Beast Castle and the Wicked Stepmother's house in these new ways with characters interacting with it in different ways. Like setting is one of my favorite elements of craft that I think is very underrated. And I love to spend time in places and just really get to know it. So getting to let these characters kind of explore places that you've read about in fairy tales or you've seen in a Disney movie and get a different experience and kind of a different tour of it. That is what would excite me the most. But I think for other people, it might just, be seeing familiar characters that kind of pop up again. And, if you are a Disney fan, there are Easter eggs, but also if you know some of the older fairy tales, I tried to weave in Easter eggs from those as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I read a lot of old fairy tales and I avoided the really dark stuff because it is a middle grade book.
Yes, exactly. I was going to talk a little bit more about like source material, like what stuff kind of inspired you maybe from your childhood or specifically when you were writing these books. Like what were some of those books that were kind of your, North Star a little bit or really inspired you as you were writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, obviously all of the original fairy tales. So looking at Disney, but then also because everyone thinks of Disney, so it's knowing, the expectations for that, what has become kind of common mythology among us in terms of these girls, but then going really deep into where did these fairy tales come from, how were they originally told, what were the different spins that were on them, and then I think just probably soaking up all of the books that I've read over my life, and they probably influenced me in ways that I was not even aware. But I did read a lot of fairy tale retellings while I was writing this to kind of see how different authors were interpreting it. And, how do you bring fairy tales to life in a way that felt really, really authentic and relatable. And I love Naomi Novik. That is like the name that really pops into my mind as someone who was just like, she blew me away. And I was like, oh, that's kind of what I want to do.
Nice.
Is create such a rich world. I mean, obviously her books are for an older audience, but I was really drawn to that.
Excellent. I will say too, I know that I listen to audiobooks too often, and there is an audiobook production of this book that Penguin Random House Audio I was actually able to listen to part of it as I read. I like to listen and read at the same time when I can. So that's really exciting. Tell me a little bit about the production. Were you very involved in that, or did you kind of just hear it when it was done?
No, I got to choose the actress, the voice actor.
Oh, how exciting.
Yeah, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. The audition tapes. And I mean, it's weird to be in that position, first of all, because you spend
Sure.
so long wanting to be in that position, and then you're there and you're like, oh, wait, are you guys sure? Like, are you sure you got the right email? But everyone was so talented that it was kind of a really good opportunity to take time to reflect and be like, okay, what do I want the book to be? And which, actress is reading in a way that I think captures it. And
Mm,
the woman who reads this book is so talented, and I think she has that beautiful fairy tale voice, but a little bit of grit, and I a
mhm.
little bit of grit in there as much as I could sneak it in for again a middle grade book.
Yeah, I love that. And like looking at the editions that are coming out, I know there's going to be a hardcover. Is the paperback coming out at the same time?
Yes, yeah, and it
Because
will have sprayed edges, so it'll be really
yes,
beautiful.
I
Yeah,
was just gonna say, like, I saw that there's sprayed edges, so like to me, that's a huge win because I feel like most of people's, book buying journey is like part of what it looks like and feels like in their hands. So that is so cool. I love that it's being published with like basically almost a special edition. Like that's so cool.
yeah, it just feels very magical that
Yes.
the books get this treatment and that they'll be really pretty. Like I think it's a good reminder that books are beautiful and it's good
Yes.
to have physical books
Yes.
and read.
Is the
Yeah.
hardcover sprayed edge too?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay, just paperback. Okay. I will say too, the art for the covers is so good. I'm a huge illustration art fan. Like I've been an art nerd since I've been a kid. It is so good. I don't have the artist name off the top of my head right now. I'll definitely, mention them in the show notes of this episode. It's so good.
Yeah, it is so good. I cried when I saw it.
I
I
bet.
felt so lucky because you never know what's going to
Right.
happen. And then, a lot of the publishing journey is turning over what you've created to other people's
Sure.
interpretation, even with the audiobook. And so I didn't know what the cover is going to look like, and they sent it to me, and it felt like what it should be. And the girls felt alive, and I just feel really honored.
That's amazing. And it's so fun. Like it's so tactile, right? Because you
Yeah.
literally flip the book upside down to see the entire cover. Like it's so cool. Like it's a really cool concept. And I think it's going to hit with a lot of people. Like it's so exciting.
Yeah, and you can kind of find like little pieces from the books on the
Yes.
cover. So it's kind of fun once you've read it to go back and see what's there and how
Yes.
everything ties together in the stories.
And it definitely does its job because when I handed this book to my, 7-year-old daughter, she's like, "Ooh, I want to read that." Like it's colorful, it's magical, it's beautiful. So that's really, really fun. I know there's a second book in the series coming out in March. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that book?
Yeah, so that book has Sleeping Beauty and Snow White and their stories flip, of course, and they face a sleeping curse that's striking a town and some evil magic that's happening. So they have to triumph over that, face dragons, face bandits, face evil monsters. There's definitely a lot more adventure in that
Mm,
book. It has a slightly different tone, which I think really speaks to the fairy tales that it came from. Every fairy tale has its own feeling, and I wanted to kind of bring that in a different way into this book. So there's just a lot of adventure, a lot of magic, and you get to see more of your favorite fairy tale princesses overcoming difficult situations.
that's awesome. Do you already have more princess swap stories kind of brewing? Like, do you know where you want to take this? Is this like a multiverse situation? Like, are we going to see colliding worlds?
Yeah, so it all takes place in Reverie, which is the main fairy tale land. The books can be read separately, but if you read them chronologically, I guess in order, if you read them in order, you will, see references to other
Okay.
books. You will see familiar characters make cameos and pop up. But they can
Oh,
also be
fun.
read separately if you prefer to read out of order. And yes, there's a third one coming out in the fall. And I don't know how much I'm supposed to say, but that one
Okay.
is it also has its own tone, a lot more adventure, even higher stakes. So they all have that common thread, but they really have different stories, different
Oh, how
feel.
exciting. And fall definitely has its own vibe, right? So I feel like
Yeah.
these books coming out in the winter and spring, like definitely give certain feelings when you sit down and read them. So
Yeah.
is that something you think about too? Like obviously you probably can't control publication dates, but
No.
like, do you envision like what the vibe is when someone's sitting there to read your book?
No, I should have now that you say it. Coming out in fall, it actually is a very summery book.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I do a lot of research into where all of the stories originated. Well, not originated, like they're from all over the world, but some of the more common versions of where they took place,
Sure.
or I just find a city in a country that sounds, I kind of like mash a lot of things together to
Yeah.
create something that feels familiar, but is also not real. And this one is a seaside city and it feels like summer, and you'll be reading it in fall. So if you're in the
There you go.
southern hemisphere, that'll be great.
There we go. I mean, the good thing about fantasy is like it doesn't matter when you pick up a book.
Yeah.
Like you're going to escape no matter what, no matter when you read.
Yeah.
I was also just thinking like this is kind of the perfect time. Like Wicked is hitting so hard right now, and my household is definitely like a Wicked house. Like if you can't hear the soundtrack probably blasting in the background of my room right now, it's probably gonna have to be edited out because my kids are going wild. Like it's kind of perfect because so many people, and I feel like it's crossing a lot of boundaries that typically, fantastical, fairy tale, musical things. It's like literally like walls are coming down. I'm like families, guys, everyone. So I really feel like this book is coming at a really great time because I feel like this series could really kind of do something similar, like bring families together and like read us because it's not your typical like Disney princess story. Like it's really like you said, there's adventure. So I just think that's a really cool thing. Obviously, that couldn't have been timed either, but maybe it was thought about. But I think that's a really cool thing to kind of be in the zeitgeist at the same time.
Yeah, I love that you say that because I saw Wicked for the first time when I was 17,
Okay.
the Broadway play. And I mean, it's touring. I lived in Seattle. I did not go to New York when I was younger,
Sure.
but it was life-changing to see how you can take a fairy tale, how you can take a story. And like I said, like I grew up writing fan fiction. Like that was the way I knew how to think about the world and think about the stories I was reading, and to see, oh, someone did fan fiction of Wizard of Oz and now it is on Broadway and I love it. It was just I listen to Broadway while I write. Like
Yes.
Wicked is such a part of how I think about writing. So it is really cool to have this happen at the same time because it's such an emotional thing for me. It's such a big part of my own story.
Yeah, and I'm definitely going to say like if you're into Wicked and into reading books, like this is right up your alley. Like I think people would think it's like such a natural thing to pick up these books.
Yeah. Gregory Maguire, if you're listening, please invite me to Wicked. I know you did not write the play, but still.
Right. I know if you are listening, Gregory.
Backstage passes would be great.
Yeah, my wife and I saw Wicked in LA when it was there for a while back in 2008. So I was, I don't know, early 20s, but thought it was really great. And then I had read the Gregory's books before that, and I thought he did this in the definitely adult genre.
Oh, yeah.
And did you read the Cinderella one? I forgot what it's called. It's so good.
Maybe I did. I remember getting Wicked as a gift when I was 8 and reading it and being like, oh, this is not what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
And I loved it. It was definitely above my reading level at the time.
Sure.
I shouldn't have been reading it, but it still sticks with you, right?
Sure, of course.
Of like knowing that the stories that you hear have so many more sides in just one book. And I think that really carried with me forever.
Yeah.
And that's where we are now. Definitely.
Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister. That's the one. Yeah. You need to read it because especially after writing one, it's really good. I actually think it's better than the Wicked book, but that's just me. We'll go from there.
Yeah. I'll check it out.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I can't help but just be recommending books all the time.
No, I love that.
So we've talked about this a little bit, and this book is definitely great for those younger age readers. Like if they're too young to read the Wicked book, which I would say 8 probably is, an 8-year-old could pick up the Princess Swap series and be safe. What were some of your favorite books that you read that weren't Wicked, that were age appropriate as you were growing up?
Yeah, it's so funny. I was thinking about this last night and I was like, I think I kind of read really anything. Because again, I was an only child. So my parents didn't really know what was okay and not okay. And they were kind of like, oh, she likes to read. Thank God. Like just give her books and feed her books. Yeah. I mean, I grew up with Harry Potter. It came out when I was young. So it was really just a framework book. I liked Lord of the Rings. I loved The Golden Compass and the His Dark Materials.
So good.
Series.
I
Oh,
loved
yeah,
it.
I was just obsessed. I still am. I think they're some of the best books ever written in any genre. Everyone should read them. I actually went to England and like saw the bench from the books. This
Wow.
is the best thing that's ever happened to me.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I also love Phantom of the Opera. Like,
Okay.
yeah, I loved the weird, dark, classical books.
Mhm.
But really anything. Like, I think if you listed out a book, I probably read it when I was younger and I,
Nice.
I was happy.
Yeah, and before we hit record, we were talking Percy Jackson because my son's really
Yeah.
into that. So Rick Riordan and all that, I'm sure was
No, that
formative.
that was more recent actually. When I
Oh,
started
okay.
writing these books, everyone was like, "Oh, you have to read Percy Jackson," and I did, and I was like, "Wow, these are so good." But I think I kind of missed it when I was that age group.
Okay.
So I thought it was, a boy book. So I
Okay.
didn't read it, which was a
Yeah.
huge mistake. But everyone should. I mean, kids should read it, adults should read it. They're fun. And it's nice to see mythology just come to life in new ways. Again, just retelling stories that really matter.
Yeah, for sure. And this is one of my go-to things as a parent raising my kids. My son's 10, my daughter's 9, and my son wants to watch everything. Like he wants to watch Marvel, and I'm like, I was always that weird kid growing up where I wanted to go, like we would watch, Mary Poppins or Peter Pan, and I wanted to go read the book that it was based on. Like I would literally go to the library and check out like the P.L. Travers books, and I would every single time, of course, realize that the books are always better, and the movies never did what
Yeah.
as much as what the books did. So now my go-to with my son, and you can't do it with everything, but a lot of things, he wanted to watch the Percy Jackson series that came out on Disney Plus, and I said, you can watch it, but you need to read the book first. Like that's kind of one of my rubrics. Like if it's age appropriate for you to watch, like I want you to know the source material first. And so I feel like that's really worked because that's gotten him to like, he loves reading, which is great, but it's really forced him to like go into these series. And now of course he's going past it because there's only one series or one season. So
Yeah.
that's like my parenting hack to like get kids to read more.
That's very smart. That's very smart. And it's fun too, because then you get to see, what got changed,
Yes.
how they did it. And it makes you a much more engaged viewer and reader and think about like, how do stories come to life in new ways?
Right.
Yeah, it makes
And
you more
like,
of an active participant.
exactly. And like I was an English major, so I'm always like, I'm thinking more deeply probably about things than usual, but I'm like, I want him to watch things critically, right? Like,
Right.
no, like, and this was a creative choice that this person made, blah, blah, blah. So it's just fun. Like, I force him to basically nerd out with me.
So it sounds like it's working. So
I hope so. I hope so.
yeah.
Yeah. He's a huge reader. I love it. I was also checking out on your website and I saw that you offer workshops and discussions related to writing and publishing. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I taught creative writing at a university level for 3 years while I was in grad school. And I loved it. I mean, seeing people bring their own stories to life and just getting to help writers, figure out what stories they want to tell. And then how do you tell it? And then also, how do you just keep doing it? Because the sitting
Sure.
down and doing it is the hardest part. And so, yeah, I host workshops around, creative writing, fairy tales, working on your own books, or also just talking about publishing. So I've done speeches about the publishing industry, basically things I wished I had known. A lot of, finding an agent and everything. That was all a lot of Googling. And I am old enough that I remember having a physical book, like a giant physical book of all the agents from that year, which is they must have had to reprint that so many times every year. I don't know how they did that, but just going through it and figuring out like, how do you query? How do you do all this? And I think that it's good to kind of demystify publishing experience for people and kind of, break down those walls a little bit because it's not very transparent a lot of the time. And there's just so much information out there. So how do you digest it? How do you make sense of it for yourself? And then I also like to do book coaching with writers, either helping them figure out how to finish a first draft or edit that first draft and refine it in order to go out and query agents. But I mean, there's nothing more fun than talking about writing and helping people, find their own stories and learn that they're capable of writing their own stories.
Sure. Tell me a little bit more about that, like your whole journey into becoming a published author. Like, I'm sure this is like years and months of like work and determination. Like tell me a little bit more about like what that journey looked like for you and like what got you to this place.
Yeah, so I was one of those annoying people that knew they wanted to be a writer when they were 6. It was just like, that is it. When I was in first grade, we had to write a short story and then present it to the class. And I did not want to present it. And I figured out that if I never finished it, I would never have to present. So I just kept writing and writing and writing until the school year ended.
Oh
And then
my
I just
gosh.
stopped writing. I was like, this is the best thing ever. I'm going to publish after I graduate elementary school and I'll get a dog. Like my dad said that that was my gift, and I have yet to get the dog. So
Okay.
that is a bit overdue at this point because I did publish a book. Um, and then I got a lot more serious when I was in college. I kind of had that same, I mean, looking back, it's, kudos to my younger self for being so confident that I could do this. So I wrote a lot of really bad early novels. And then I did write one that got me an agent when I was 20. And, the publishing industry has a lot of ups and downs. A lot of books don't sell. And I think that's great. I don't think people should be publishing that young. And so it was a really good experience to figure out, what do I actually want to write? I didn't know I wanted to write fairy tales until I was like 27. So 7 years after that was when I figured out, okay, this is who I actually am as an author. And then I wrote a middle grade fantasy novel. And then that kind of started all of this. Yeah. So
Excellent.
at least 10 years professionally of these
Okay.
into life. Yeah.
Wow. Or do you think any of those other works will ever see the light of day, or what is your plan for those?
Yeah, several of the earlier books, I think right now are they're not anywhere where they should be. But having this new lens of, okay, I write fantasy, I write fairy tales. How do I bring that into these other books? And I think playing with them in that way has allowed them, like the core of them, to really expand and flower. And I'm really excited to have the time to go back and revisit them, rewrite them, and then hopefully share them more widely.
Excellent. That's so great, because I do have a lot of conversations and see people online. If you're a big reader, odds are that at some point in your life you've maybe dabbled in writing, or it's not like, granted, every single reader is a writer, but I know I've talked to people, even when it comes down to like content creation, or jumping into like even talking about books online, or starting a podcast or whatever. And I feel like that's such a good thing to hear, that like you were just doing it before it was anything, right? And so I feel like if you love it, and it's going to pour out of you. So like, I love to hear that you were writing it's the same thing that like Brandon Sanderson, like he was writing books like forever before he got published, right? So like, publishing is kind of like the end, or maybe, or even the start sometimes, but like, it's like a certain point in a journey. And I really think that's important for people to hear, that like, if you love it, then you need to just be doing it. And some of that, the nuts and bolts, like you said, the agents of it all, the industry of it all, will maybe come later, or that might be a different kind of work that you have to do.
Yeah, I think you really need to be able to love it without thinking about the end result, because the end result is such a matter of chance and luck.
Sure.
Like, I mean, it took me 10 years, but I also had built up a body of work. I'd built up a voice and the kinds of stories I wanted to tell. I built up relationships. And I think because of those 10 years of getting rejections and seeing, hey, this isn't working for me, I was able to have a lot more fun with what I was writing, because I was like, oh, the stakes are kind of made up. Like, I could get published, I could not, but what matters is that I get to do what I want to do, and that's right. But yeah, I think any creative practice takes a long time, but all of that stuff matters. Like every bad story, every, quote unquote bad book, it is teaching you who you want to be, who you are, how you want to reach your audience, and what is most fun for you on the page. So there's no wasted word, I think.
That's a great way to put it. That might be the title of this episode. There's no wasted word. I love it. That's awesome. So I asked this question of all my guests, even though I've kind of strayed from doing this myself as a segment on the show, just because of how I release episodes, but I still really enjoy asking this question, because this podcast is all about books. It's book first. I want to know what the last book that you read was, what are you currently reading, and what do you plan to read next?
Nice. I love that. I just read God of the Woods by Liz Moore. It was amazing. I thought all the hype was totally worth it. The cover art is also so beautiful, and it takes place in the woods, which obviously, as a fairy tale writer, is an important place for me. I'm reading Delirium by Lauren Oliver. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
No.
Yeah, it's a YA science. I guess it's like kind of science fiction-y. It's a world where when people turn 18, they have a procedure to make them not have the ability to love. Because love is a disease. And I loved the concept, and it's a really fun read. And then I have Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher on my shelf.
Okay.
So yeah, another fairy tale retelling.
Nice.
Very excited about.
Love it. I just totally thought of this out of nowhere. Into the Woods. Like, have you listened? Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, sorry, that's like one of the key formative musicals in this whole fairy tale thing.
Yeah, I love musicals.
Okay.
Like my Spotify Wrap every year is just Broadway. Like it is too embarrassing to spread widely because people would be like, you don't engage with contemporary culture. You've been listening to Wicked for like 12 years and you haven't stopped. Yeah, I love Into the Woods. I've seen it. I've seen the movie. I love the soundtrack. It's a little bit darker for me. Like I love a dark story, but the ending I always have a little bit of an issue with. But I love the music. So I did listen to this or to that while I was writing these books.
Excellent. I just thought of that. I was like, this is like they go together, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a really good kind of lesson. And like, how do you balance all of these different characters and how do you keep what's core about the story when everyone's being mashed together? And how do you get Meryl Streep to star in the movie adaptation of your books?
Goals. She could be the stepmother, right?
Oh my God, I wish. If you're listening, Meryl.
That's so funny. Is there anything else you want to discuss?
What book did you just finish and what book are you currently reading?
Oh gosh. Well, one of the books I just finished was yours, in preparation for this episode. So The Princess Swap. Very timely and appropriate. Actually, I think that was the last book that I finished. It literally was, as of this recording. I remember the other question I was going to ask you, but I'll hold that. Then I read like multiple books at a time because I'm psychotic. So I'm currently reading Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. It's a standalone in his Cosmere journey. And then I'm doing a buddy read with my wife. We're reading the first Bosch novel that Michael Connelly wrote because I'm a huge crime fiction person. And I'm just proud that I got her into reading these books because she really liked the Lincoln Lawyer series on Netflix. And so that's kind of like every night we read a little bit together, which I'm so happy because she's not a huge reader. She reads, but like I'm so stoked that I got her into the books because I sing Michael Connelly's praises all the time. I think he's one of the best fiction writers ever. And so I'm just so happy to be doing that with her.
That is so cute. I love that. That's a great practice.
I know I'd never really done it before, but I'm here for it. Instead of watching a show together, we'll just be like, hey, we're going to read a little bit. So for as long as we can stay awake. That's what I was going to ask you, because this episode is out in January of 2025. So it's a new year. Do you set reading goals for yourself for every year? I know that's a big practice in the book reading world. Like if you do, did you hit your goal for 2024? Like what are your goals for 2025 in terms of reading? Or do you even do that?
Yeah, I do. After starting the series, it's definitely dipped because so much time is spent actually writing, but obviously you can't write if you aren't reading. So I aim for 50.
Okay.
And I think I'm almost there. This year, I am giving myself a lot of time over the next couple of weeks to fully catch up. But back in the day when I was in grad school, it was, usually 70 to 100. And those were the good days. And I'd love to get back there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. 50 was my goal in 2024 and I exceeded it, which was fine and good, but I feel like that's still most reasonable for me. But okay, nice. Good. Yeah. I feel like that 50 range is most reasonable for most, working adults.
Yeah. There's a lot going on, but I mean, books are the most important thing. So always have to prioritize reading.
I totally agree. And you can't help yourself when you get into something that you don't want to just stop doing it. Like, yeah, it's the best.
Yeah.
Well, where can listeners find you and engage with you online, especially now if they're interested in checking out your book? Like, where can they find you?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm on Instagram at Kim Bussing. I post infrequently, but I am on there far, far too much. So happy to engage, happy to chat. Always love meeting with people and talking with other readers. And then also I do have a website where you can email me, kim-bussing.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. The book, The Princess Swap, is out officially today, January 7th, the release date of this episode. Congratulations. It is out everywhere you can find books. I highly recommend it. Thanks again, Kim, for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Jason.
Thanks again to Kim Bussing for joining me today and discussing her new book series, The Princess Swap. Book 1, Cinderella and the Beast / Beauty and the Glass Slipper is out today, and it's a great book for fans of fairy tale stories with a modern twist. Well, I hope everyone has an amazing start to the new year. I can't wait to see what this year has in store for all of us. I'll be back with another episode next month, so I'll see you then. Thank you so much for listening. For more of my content, visit my website at thisdadreads.com for full book reviews, interviews, and articles. Follow me on socials at thisdadreads on Twitter and Instagram. This Dad Reads, the podcast, is produced by Aravis Industries and me. Special thanks to my editor, Jeremy Tuttle, and to Coma-Media for the use of their song Bounce. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and leave me a 5-star review. It really helps. Catch you next time.